Hey guys, tonight we follow the faint scent of smoke not from Zeus's thunderbolts or Hephaestus' forge, but from a quieter flame. You drift up through the mists of time and myths, where golden palaces shimmer on mountaintops and gods bicker like dysfunctional roommates. Olympus is buzzing, as always. There's Hermes zipping past with winged shoes and gossip, Ares flexing unnecessarily in a mirror, and Aphrodite arguing with literally anyone who breathes. But something's missing. Where's the warm glow? Where's the calm center of it all? You step inside the grand hall of the gods and instantly feel the absence. No flickering fire, no kettle over coals, no sleepy dog curled beside the hearth. Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, home, and not causing scenes, isn't here. She didn't turn mortals into trees or seduce anyone midstorm. In every Greek home, the hearth fire was sacred to her. There's no record of her chucking mortals off cliffs or transforming into golden animals. No beef with other gods, no divine vengeance montages, no war chariots. You, Dante, get to be the goddess of the hearth, the foundation of every home and city without holding some serious power. While the others exploded outward, Hestia burned inward, consistent, unshakable, warm. Just absence. And it's in that absence where the most interesting things smolder. Yep, right next to the onions and clay jars of olive oil. Modest, yes, but deeply appreciated. Ever had warm bread straight from the fire? Now you're in her territory, in the hearth that never goes out, in the flicker of warmth on a cold night, in the sigh of someone finally safe inside. You might miss her if you blink, but once you feel her presence, you realize she's the only one who is holding the whole place together. Imagine trying to pray and stir porridge at the same time. That's dedication. Before big decisions, voyages, or sacrifices, people tossed grain or oil into her flames. She was the first one honored at every offering. The flame may be low, but it's steady. And in a world of thundering gods and chaos, that's exactly what you need. Her name was whispered before Zeus, before Hera, even before your cousin who thinks he knows everything about mythology because he watched one Percy Jackson movie. She didn't even have epic animal symbols. No peacock feathers, no sacred boars, no giant anvils. Just fire. Literal fire. Kant. But not the angry, forest-consuming kind, the cozy one. Some ancient sources say she gave up her throne to Dionysus, the god of wine, theater, and questionable decisions. Others suggest she just stepped back. Like someone at a chaotic family dinner who quietly clears the table and escapes to do the dishes in peace. The one you fall asleep next to after a long day of not being immortal. I want to know which corner of the world you're listening from. A world where the center matters more than the edges. Where the unspectacular is sacred. Where the quiet woman in the background turns out to be the reason the roof docenti fall in. Again, her place is set. Her fire tools are lined up neatly, but the flame is cold. Sure, Hermes could take you on a wild ride, but he'd probably ditch you midway for a prank. Apollo might serenade you, but also judge your playlist. And Zeus, don't get me started, Hestia. She'd offer you bread, ask how your day was, and actually listen. You probably won't survive this drama if you expect explosions, betrayal, or scandal. She's got a clay pot of simmering lentils and a spoon she carved herself. She glances up, gives a small smile, and returns to stirring. No dramatic cloak swish, no divine entrance. Just warmth. Steadiness. It's a kind of presence that makes you realize your shoulders have been tensed for the last 12 centuries. Because tonight's tale, it's about the goddess who said, "You know what? I'm good," and left the Olympus group chat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I post your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find Hestia not in the halls of lightning and gossip, but just outside, beneath an olive tree. Unlike most of her siblings, Hestia didn't leap into the spotlight. And it's not that she wasn't important. Far from it. She was, quite literally, the center of things. But if you were to scroll ancient social media, say, a papyrus-based Instagram Hestia wouldn't show up in many selfies. Historians still argue whether Hestia ever actually left Mount Olympus, or if she simply opted out of the drama so hard she became spiritually invisible. But make no mistake, she wasn't weak. She was deliberate. And you, sleepy traveler, are now wandering deeper into her world. Funny thing is, in a pantheon packed with loud personalities and mythological trauma, Hestia might be the one you'd actually want to hang out with. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some small towns, Hestia wasn't worshipped in temples, but in kitchens. And while the other Olympians threw extravagant feasts with enchanted meats and wine fountains, Hestia's offerings were often just flour, oil, and a little salt. And even though she didn't star in many myths, she's there in the margins. As you lie back now, eyes drooping a bit, let the stillness of her energy settle in your chest. You blink, and now you're further back, way back, standing in the chill emptiness of a world still trying to make sense of itself. The Earth hasn't fully committed to being hospitable yet. Somewhere in this swirling prehistory, you hear a scream, actually. Several screams, and realize you've just stumbled into one of the worst family reunions in mythology. The Titans are in power, and Cronus, their head honcho, has decided that parenting means swallowing your children's whole. Neat. He grows up in hiding, gets the magical goat milk treatment, and returns to force Cronus into vomiting up the other Olympians. Honestly, being puked out doesn't sound like a globe, but it's progress. But not Hestia. She looks around at her siblings and simply steps back. She claims the hearth, and it's not because she's shy. It's because she sees something they don't. While the others scramble to divide kingdoms and argue over mortal sacrifices, she wraps her power around a single flame, small, consistent, foundational. And who's the first kid he eats? Hestia. Not the kind that looks good on murals, but the kind that holds systems together. Hestia doesn't need dramatic origin myths or grand vengeance arcs, and flirt and conjure storms, but there's always a fire somewhere in the middle. No curses, no lovers, no surprise births from the forehead, just constancy. But in every myth where someone finds their way home, where a hero rests, where a prayer is whispered in safety, Hestia's there. She docently rolled her eyes at Aphrodite's love triangles or Ares' shirtless flexing. She just opts out, and that's maybe the wildest move of all. To live on Olympus and choose not to participate. That's like attending every episode of a reality show and declining to be edited into the plot. Off camera, lighting the room. Always, it doesn't wear her name, but it's hers. She looks up again. Not startled, just aware. Maybe she nods. Maybe she gestures to an empty seat beside her. No words, just an invitation. 'Cause the one who was swallowed first and spat out last doesn't need to explain herself. In some rare traditions, Hestia was invoked not just in temples or homes, but aboard ships. Far from the drama, wrapped in something steadier than myth. Imagine that, a vessel destined for chaos. Sailors still needed the concept of home with them. Not Zeus, not Ares, not even Poseidon. They wanted Hestia in the hull, glowing quietly. The fire isn't screaming for attention, it's simply burning, keeping things alive, cooking the ambrosia, warming the divine feet. She is the reason civilization didn't collapse when the gods inevitably forgot to take out the celestial trash. Before the feast, before the toast, before thanking the gods for victory or survival, you thanked Hestia, 'cause without her, there'd be no roof, no stew, no bed. Not because she did anything wrong, she hadn't even developed a personality yet. That by choosing the hearth, she anchored herself to every household, every sacred fire, every city's center. Instead of ruling from above, she ruled from within. The one who constantly reminds everyone, I was born first, by the way. Nope, Hestia has nothing to prove. That might be why no one ever tries to overthrow her. She doesn't play the game, so they can't beat her at it. Try gossiping about someone who's too boring to scandalize. And let's be honest, who do you trust more, the flashy sibling lobbing thunderbolts or the one making sure your soup doesn't burn? She was firstborn. That's all it took. No cake, no baby blanket, just straight into Dad's gullet. You can almost hear the wet squelch and collective ooh from future mythology majors. Historians still argue whether this story was a metaphor for oppressive patriarchal control or just ancient Greeks being deeply weird. Probably both. It's like exiting a time capsule where everyone else kept yelling while you practiced stillness. And from this point on, she does something remarkable. She never tries to reclaim what she lost. As you hover near this cosmic digestive situation, you might be wondering, how does one recover from being eaten alive by their father? Well, for Hestia, apparently you just wait. She stays in there, tucked away in the Titan's stomach along with her siblings for what feels like eons. And here's your first clue into her temperament. She doesn't panic, doesn't scheme, doesn't shout for help. She waits, quiet, watchful, while Hera fumes, Poseidon twitches, and Hades sulks in the corner. Hestia conserves her energy. Eventually, Zeus' youngest of them all gets saved by their mother Rhea and given the superhero arc. So Hestia emerges, oldest and newest, all at once. She's the firstborn and the last regurgitated. See, in a classic family drama, you'd expect the eldest to stomp back in, demanding her play some fiery vengeance, at least a dramatic crown snatch. They each get domains to rule: seas, skies, war, marriage, the underworld. Hestia, you're probably still brushing off bits of Cronus's stomach acid from your toga as she turns away from the power struggle. No throne, no problem. Here's a fringe theory you'll enjoy. Some scholars believe Hestia's step back wasn't submission, it was strategy. It's a concept we rarely value enough. Quiet endurance. She also avoids becoming that sister. You know the one? And while you float above Olympus now, you'll notice something. Where the gods gather, they bicker. Mainstream mythology tends to skip over her because she doesn't make for good content. Another odd little tidbit. She doesn't resent the drama either, and still, people loved her. In fact, Hestia was often the first deity honored in prayers and offerings. You think of her now, sitting cross-legged by a fire you didn't notice before. Let the warmth fill your chest. You're here now, in her quiet orbit. So now, you're sitting by the fire hers, not some blazing temple bonfire for show, but a small, crackling hearth with ash just starting to turn white at the edges. It smells like cedar, and time feels like it's dozing. While every other god is clawing for space, Hestia is letting go of hers. Actually, I'm fine standing. And by standing, we of course mean quietly tending the fire, while everyone else argues over whether mortals are worth saving this week. At the infamous banquet of the 12 Olympians, yes, that VIP divine dinner party where only the most powerful deities got a throne, Hestia gave hers up, voluntarily, to Dionysus. Of all people? Around you, Mount Olympus groans with divine commotion, but here at the edge, Hestia's world glows quietly. And that's the thing, really? And while Zeus is out there seducing clouds or punishing hubris, Hestia is the reason those leaders even have a table to argue at. And if that fire ever went out, it wasn't just a practical inconvenience. It was a cosmic emergency. In every home's kitchen fire, in every sacrificial altar. Not the loud kind, but the type that endures because it refuses to get caught in the storm. He bursts into Olympus with a crowd of satyrs and mortal drama students, his crown askew and wine sloshing out of his goblet. He's glitter and noise and energy. The kind of god who would accidentally burn the tablecloth and call it performance art. Even the sacred fire of Rome Vesta, her Roman equivalent, was tended by virgin priestesses, who weren't allowed to let it go out under pain of death. But because she sees what no one else does, that Olympus isn't missing a throne, it's missing balance. The hearthfire wasn't just a nice household feature, was legally sacred. The home fire couldn't be put out carelessly. New settlements took flame from the parent city's hearth. It wasn't just warmth, it was origin. The founding signal of civilization. Imagine that lighting your new life with the coals of the old one, as if saying, "We carry our calm with us." No pressure, ladies. That calm. Inhale, not to the prayers shouted from mountaintops, but to the muttered ones over soup. The whispered ones after long days. The ones that end not in pleas, but in a sigh. Crackle, no problem. A little warmer, a little more still. The fire dances, the world quiets. And Hestia, as always, tends without asking for applause. She never needed one. She had something better. Exhale, glow. There's something revolutionary in her quiet. Something unnerving, too, for the other gods. Because if she can wield such influence without thunder or temples or armies, what does that say about the rest of them? That steady presence that doesn't crack jokes or win battles or seduce mortals. It just stays lit. Hestia doesn't abdicate. She reframes what it means to rule. Instead of towering over Olympus, she settles into the mortar between its stones. The city had to relight it from the original flame in Delphi, as if saying, we must go back to the source. This idea that while the rest of the universe unravels with gods morphing into animals, flinging curses, or birthing fully armored daughters from their skulls, one goddess is just, keeping the flame alive and not once demanding a parade for it. No sermon, no mythic pronouncement, just tending. That's the word. She tends to the flame, to others, to order itself, and that source. It's always her. Imagine it. 12 thrones around a polished celestial table, glittering with ambrosia cocktails and golden grapes. And one goddess pushes her chair back and says, historians still debate whether this moment was part of the canonical mythos or later Roman embellishment. Some even think it was a subtle theological restructuring to make space for newer gods. But whatever the origin, the story stuck. Hestia gave up her throne so no one would fight. Ares, the violence of war. Hermes, travel and theft and fast-talking sales pitches. But Hestia, she's symbolic of stillness. Of the thing that never moves, but allows everything else to. The hearth isn't the door or the wind or the blade, the axis, the center that holds. And they would have fought. Hera would have screamed. Athena would have lawyered. Ares would have flipped the table. You know that one sibling at the holiday dinner who says, look, if it stops the drama, I'll just sit at the kids' table. That's her. Except the kids are mortals, and the table is the foundation of civilization. Most gods are symbolic of something active. Poseidon, the sea's rage. Here's a delightful oddity. In ancient Delphi, one of the most sacred sites in Greece, the eternal flame in the Prytaneum, the city's main hall, was dedicated to Hestia. You can almost see it now. Civic leaders in dusty sandals sweating profusely, trying to rekindle their political legitimacy using nothing but a torch and a prayer. She doesn't need a throne because she's already in every space. It's oddly comforting, isn't it? You sit with that for a moment. The image of someone strong enough to be forgotten. There's a strange power in that. You wonder what she thinks of Dionysus, the one who got her throne? And Hestia, she just steps aside. Not because he deserves it, not because she's tired. Think about it. Who gives up a seat in heaven, not out of fear, but out of wisdom? You hear her now not speaking, but shifting slightly, adding a small log to the fire. It hisses quietly, like it's sighing in relief. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In most ancient Greek cities, and there it is again, you start to feel your own breath mirror the rhythm of the fire. Hestia smiles faintly as you think this, as if she heard your question. Maybe she did. Maybe she's always listening. no throne. You lean back now. The scent of smoke curls upward as the fire settles into its rhythm crackle. Pause, pop, sigh. You're still there beside her, Hestia, the one who has been passed over and yet present, overlooked but always essential. It's a new day on Mount Olympus, not that days feel particularly linear up here. And while the rest of the pantheon wakes with the kind of chaos only immortals can muster, Hestia is already awake. You stretch and yawn, just as Hermes zips past again, already on his third errand and second unnecessary prank. Ares storms out of some ridiculous dream about chariots. Apollo is rehearsing his Golden Lyre playlist, Genid. Artemis is threatening to shoot the next god who knocks over her deer. You spot Athena in a corner, sketching out a battle strategy that no one asked for. The divine drama kicks off at sunrise. No need for caffeine. Not Zeus. Not the recipient, God. Hestia first, and Hestia last. No dramatic prophecies or flying chariots. Just a slow circle around a fire, as if saying, "Now you're ours." That's how central she was. Home began with her bubble. You picture a humble farmer lighting a bit of fat on the family hearth, whispering, "This one's for you." No golden goblets, no fanfare, just reverence. In a pantheon full of gods who demand attention, Hestia earns loyalty. Historians still argue whether her near-total absence from conflict was due to lost records or deliberate avoidance. Most deities needed sprawling marble complexes, animal sacrifices, and a full-time hype team. But Hestia, she just needed a fire. It's a simple circle of stones and a flame. Some think she may even predate the formal pantheon, a holdover from fire goddess cults. You can almost hear her laughing at that. Predate. Honey, I invented showing up. Just consistency. And humans, frankly, find that a little boring. You haven't thought about the drama in a while. Haven't flinched. Haven't checked the time. You're just here, sitting, breathing. Warm, we love rise and fall arcs. Hestia offers neither. She's not a story. She's a rhythm. She didn't care if you prayed in gold robes or tomato-stained tunics. If the fire was tended, she was there. But honestly, it's probably the latter. When you are the hearth, you don't walk around starting fires. You maintain them. She doesn't need more. The gods that scream for attention are often the ones most insecure. Hestia is content. And that, in itself, is her miracle. She's wrapping flatbread in linen, hands moving with a kind of muscle memory that comes from centuries of not messing things up. Not once can any other god say the same. And where's Hestia? Still by the fire. Stirring something simple, warm, and probably underseasoned. She's not in the meeting. She's not yelling. She's not asking to be noticed. The other gods may flash across the sky, but Hestia is the gravitational pull. Hestia turns to you and raises one eyebrow as if to say, "Still think I'm boring?" Ever tried building a house with no kitchen? A city with no central square? A temple with no altar? That's Hestia. You flinch. Hestia doesn't. She pokes the fire, steady as ever. Maybe she mutters something like, "Let them yell. I've got stew to stir." Her voice is soft, almost bored, but not unkind. She's not the paint or the stained glass or the incense teas, the foundation stone, buried deep, holding it all in place. But she is working. This is how it goes. And yet she's not a pushover. You once heard a mortal call her the goddess of stay-at-home energy, which is cute, but wildly incomplete. She's not housebound. She's the reason there is a house. She's the one who ensures that when the gods come home after flooding a kingdom or seducing a cloud or banishing a mortal for eating grapes the wrong way, there's something warm waiting. This quiet power made her beloved among mortals. You don't have to be powerful to worship Ares, just angry. You don't have to be wise to invoke Athenage, just desperate for a good grade. But to honor Hestia, you have to show up. You have to be there. Not fighting, not winning, just living, with care. Not Hermes, the travel god, not Zeus, lord of the skies. No. First, they'd asked Hestia to guard the home in their absence and guide them back again. Her power wasn't in the going, it was in the return. There, as a mainstream fact, most mythology podcasts gloss over. Every sacrificial offering began and ended with Hestia. And here, as a fun little oddity, an ancient Greek ceremony for adopting a child included walking them around the hearth. That's it. You begin to notice how everything spins in her orbit. And yet, no scandals, no rivalries. She never even cursed a mortal, never transformed anyone into a shrub. You hear the din of an argument starting down the marble hallway, Aphrodite and Hera, probably about the fairest goddess title again. This is her domain. Not action, but reaction. Not presence, but resonance. You recall another curious tradition. Before setting off on a journey, families would pray to Hestia. What's wilder? She rarely needed temples. You realize now that this divine minimalism isn't lack its clarity. There's a quiet little debate among scholars about whether Hestia represents a pre-Olympian idea of divinity, older, earthier, closer to the home. You glance at her again. Maybe that's why she's not famous. No falls from grace, no tragic flaws, and you've slipped into that rhythm without realizing. The hearth glows. And no, you don't. You stretch your legs a little. The floor beneath you is smooth, carved from some kind of stone that's never cold. The fire is steady. Olympus rumbles above, and below thunder claps somewhere in the upper chambers. And the sound of Hermes crash landing through a window might echo down the corridor soon, but none of it reaches this spot. Here, by Hestia's flame, the volume is always turned low. Let's be real. Mount Olympus is a disaster of divine personalities. Hera, high-strung and eternally suspicious. Zeus, powerful but attention-hungry. Ares, always looking for a fight, even if it's just over a board game. Aphrodite, half goddess, half romantic tornado. And Athena, for all her wisdom, cannot resist inserting herself into everyone's strategy meetings. You glance up. She's slicing dried figs now. Neatly, carefully. She shows up when the fire is low and the guests are late. Ares just stomped past again, dragging a spear and humming what can only be described as an aggressive war chant. You spot Dionysus giggling over a pomegranate and some scandalous grape wine mixology. Not bricks, not beams. The idea, it's a space where your breath slows, where shoes come off, where silence becomes kindness. You get the sense that if the universe began to unwind, Hestia would be the one gathering the pieces, sweeping up after creation like it was just another dinner party gone wrong. You're not sure if she alleled them or offered them to the next soul who wanders in looking for peace. Probably both. Probably without a word. No fanfare. She's the Human Resources Department of Olympus. HR brought soup, never took sides, and glowed softly. She didn't need temples because she was the temple. And somehow, that's the biggest twist of all. A story with no climax, just comfort. Not water, not gold, not holy books, just fire. But maybe the stars would burn a little steadier. The flame doesn't flare or dim, just continues. She still hasn't said a word, and yet you feel more understood here than anywhere else on this mountain. It's as if to say, this is our identity, our beginning, our still center. It's wild to think how she remains unbothered while surrounded by the least chill collection of immortals in all recorded history. He glances toward the fire, nods stiffly, and keeps going. But you don't want to be in their stories. You want to rest. Even the King of Gods knows not to disturb the hearth. That feeling, that's her domain. Not love, not war return. Maybe both. Some claim her importance faded over time because she didn't do enough. Hera might throw shade about some absentee deity who won tea way in on marriage disputes, but Hestia won't take the bait. You've spent enough time in loud places with loud people, saying loud things just to fill space. But here, the silence is the substance. It has depth. And you start to think maybe that's what all the other gods are afraid of, not Hestia. Lack of ambition, but her lack of insecurity. She smiled politely and passed the bread. But it's more accurate to say she did the one thing that actually matters. She kept things going. Quietly, always. The others need narratives. They want songs, followers, temples filled with incense and drama. Hestia doesn't. She already is the point. People fear him, pity him, theorize about him, Hestia. They just trusted her. And that's more dangerous than it sounds. Trust isn't loud. It's not flashy. But once it's broken, the whole system collapses. Which is why she never let it break. The story starts and ends with her, but she doesn't need to star in the middle. You keep your head down. The safest place to be is beside Hestia. She has no interest in manipulation or control. There's a reason her siblings constantly spin off into conflict and stories while she stays rooted. Historians still argue whether her lack of mythic moments was a result of patriarchal dismissal, or just a cultural reverence too deep to dramatize. Now consider this. Even Hades, literal ruler of the dead, got more personality development. She listens when mortals mutter prayers with full mouths. Meanwhile, Hera is plotting something, probably involving a cursed cow. And Hestia. She's placing a cushion beneath your knees, softly. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some versions of myth, Hestia isn't just goddess of the hearth, but of architecture itself, of the invisible lines that create home. Think of every time you've sighed at your front door, or fallen into a couch, or stared blankly into a pot of boiling water after a long day. She's immune to Olympus politics because she doesn't feed them. You can't help but admire that. Zeus walks by, grumbling something about mortals and their ungrateful festivals. Here's a historical fact that slides under most textbooks. When ancient Greek cities founded colonies, they took fire from the mother city's Hestia flame. It wasn't portable in a box. Someone had to carry it, protect it, light new lives with it. The goddess of this act, you shift a bit on your seat and realize you've stopped expecting a big reveal. There won't be one. No twist, no betrayal, just warmth. You wonder, for a moment, what would happen if every god were like Hestia? Olympus would be quieter, sure. Probably less entertaining. She offers you something: a small plate of dates and soft cheese. Divine snack break. Yes, please. You look around at the other gods. They glow, yes. They're loud, powerful, fascinating. Hestia pats the hearthstones with one gentle hand. That's her gift. You're sitting comfortably now, fingers warmed by the steady pulse of Hestia's hearth. The silence between logs popping is soft, like cotton pressed to your ears. She doesn't flinch, not even a blink. Just a small sigh and a turn of the wrist as she stirs something in a clay pot. Barley, maybe? You half expect her to have a tally scratched somewhere. Times Zeus almost got smote. 337. But she doesn't keep score. Hestia may have chosen simplicity, but others did not. Enter Poseidon, god of the sea, beard connoisseur, and all-around emotionally questionable sibling. And Apollo, sun god, golden ego, and part-time poetry critic. Both of them proposed to her at the same time. That's not her way. Hestia serving honey cakes. And there's Poseidon leaning against the wall, like some mythic heartthrob with seaweed in his hair. And Apollo composing a pickup haiku mid-serenade. It's a drama waiting to unfold. But the quiet doesn't last. A loud thud rattles the ceiling above you, followed by a very unmistakable, echoing, "I said," nitrogen monoxide. That means no jealousy, no messy custody battles over mythical children, no dramatic exits by chariot. Which can only mean Hera has caught Zeus being ... Zeus again. In Olympus, To have no lovers, no rage, no revenge. That's not weakness, it's clarity. She knew who she was early and didn't flinch when the drama circled close. Virginity, in myth, wasn't prudishness. It was autonomy. Hestia didn't do that. She simply refused to be caught in someone else's plot. Artemis, Athena, and Hestia all held that vow, but only Hestia did it without weapons, ultimatums, or feral animals. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't public, but it was sacred. Chaos, as usual. Not to ask for love, or riches, or beauty, but for steadiness. For the courage to choose their own rhythm. A way to say, I'm building a life, and I want you in it. The power of non-participation. The power of not weaponizing knowledge. You glance at Hestia. She's never in a hurry, and yet things get done. The hearth doesn't blaze. It pulses. The smell is comfort. Warm grain, singed wood, something slightly sweet. Maybe she's baking. Didn't vote, didn't even attend the meeting. When asked why, she reportedly said, "If I leave, the fire dies." Mic drop. She keeps peace by being peace, not by enforcing it, not by judging others, and never by gossiping. Still, that doesn't mean she wasn't noticed by the more chaotic gods. Oh no. And Apollo is off composing another vaguely self-referential hymn. Hestia is here, feeding the ones who didn't ask to be fed, keeping the space warm for anyone who needs to sit down. Not asking for loyalty, but receiving it anyway. Every argument, every confession, every divine misstep whispered after a few too many goblets of nectar. Not in phrases or battles, but in heat and hush. Like she already knew you'd be exactly here. You're no longer watching for story twists. You're settling into stillness. She hears it, logs it, and lets it go. You can imagine it, can't you? Mount Olympus, wine flowing, harps playing in the distance. Only it doesn't, because Hestia shuts it down. Gracefully, completely, and for good. She vows to remain a virgin goddess, a term the ancients used more about independence than about relationships. She simply said, "No thank you." And the gods, for once, listened. Historians still argue whether this vow came from a place of rejection, trauma, or choice. Was it to avoid the traps of Olympus romance? Was it a symbol of untouchable sanctity? Was it because she knew no god could match her inner stillness? All plausible, all impossible to prove. But in her refusal, she gained something the others never seemed to find. Freedom. She belongs to no one. No husband, no consort. No string of divine exes or revenge-fueled love triangles. Just herself, her flame, and peace. That's the twist the others never saw coming. You think of all the times you've tried to be polite, to people please, to explain your no until it sounds like a maybe, and mortals adored her for it. Here's a lovely historical detail. In some Athenian homes, when girls came of age, they made small offerings to Hestia, tokens of transition, like a lock of hair or a bit of woven cloth. You picture those girls, nervous, hopeful, lighting a fire, whispering into the flames. Hestia gave them that, just by existing. Meanwhile, on the other side of Olympus, Aphrodite is tossing rose petals over a heartbroken minor god, and Ares is punching a boulder because he misunderstood a poem. But Hestia, she's slicing bread, and she knows everything. Make no mistake, when you live in the middle of Olympus, tending the fire, you hear everything. That's power, too. There's a quirky story you've probably never heard. Once, when the gods were arguing over who was the most important, Hestia didn't speak. It's always the quiet ones. You notice now that her posture never shifts much. She doesn't fidget, doesn't fuss. Every move is intentional. You breathe in deeply. Maybe she always is. There is a gentle satisfaction in knowing that while Poseidon flexes his oceanic dominion, you realize, as your eyelids start to lower, that you've begun to think in rhythm with her. Hestia glances at you, not like she's checking on you. And so you are. You wake up just a little eyes fluttering open, not because someone shook you, but because the fire shifted. A log settles. The light changes. Hestia's still there, of course, kneeling by the hearth with hands in her lap. No drama, no disruption, just a slight change in flame, and somehow your heart slows back down again. You notice, for the first time, that her face isn't the smooth, marble-perfect mask that other gods wear. Zeus tossing bolts. Athena in full armor. Aphrodite leaning coyly. Even Dionysus, drunk and draped in ivy, gets a dozen marbles with his name, at Hestia. You struggle to recall even one famous sculpture, practically non-existent. She's the goddess everyone honored, but few bothered to immortalize in marble. Which, honestly, she probably found hilarious. She looks real, lived in, not old, exactly timeless, perhaps, but her eyes carry something older than Olympus. Not weary, not bored, just aware. Like she's seen every storm come and go, and still chooses the quiet after. Watching all these divine art commissions go out Zeus, demanding a 40-foot golden ivory colossus. Hermes insisting on winged sandals in every portrait, and Hestia quietly declining the sculptor's offer. And that's what makes it so strange when you start to realize there are barely any statues of her. Really? You think of the ancient temples and ruins, of museum wings filled with gleaming gods. Every time an offering was made, the name Hestia came first, no exceptions. Even the big personalities, Zeus, Athena, Apollo, they all waited their turn behind her. In our world of attention economies and headline gods, here's Hestia quiet, veiled, seated, and she's the one holding it all together. Like the Wi-Fi router in the corner of your house, silent, underappreciated, but if it goes out, instant panic. She can be anywhere because she's not trying to be everywhere. She doesn't hoard it, she gives it, tends it, offers it. She's not a goddess of fire like Hephaestus is. That flame wasn't just for heat. It was a symbol of life, of safety, of connection. And Hestia was its guardian. Empires crumbled, temples toppled, the myths got retold and reskinned and revised. But in homes, people still lit candles, still warmed bread, still gathered near fire. She's the goddess of what fire does gather. Warm, cook, unite. Over millennia, from farmhouse hearths to campfires to bedside candles, she never needed a pedestal. She's not interested in recognition. She's interested in resonance. You picture the flicker, the smell of wood, and memory. Historians still argue why that is. Some say her modesty discouraged representation. She holds space instead. Emotional bandwidth. The unseen infrastructure of community. You don't build monuments to something that's always with you. You carve marble to honor the feeling of sitting down after a long day and exhaling. You just do it. You live it. And somewhere in that exhale, she smiles. All the other gods have branding. Logos, essentially. Athena gets owls. Hermes has his little winged hat. Poseidon and his ever-overcompensating trident. But Hestia? She has the fire. No animal mascot, no flashy emblem. Others think her image was considered too sacred to depict. Or maybe sculptors just couldn't handle the challenge of making calm and nurturing look dramatic in stone. Not riding a griffin into war. Just a woman sitting, stirring, smiling, maybe. The sculptor would get halfway through and mutter, "This looks like my Aunt Helen," and Hestia would shrug. That's the point. There are vases with her name, inscriptions on household altars, shrines with coals and bowls of olive oil. But full-blown public art. Shocking, right? A modest goddess on Mount Olympus. The bar was low. While others were being painted lounging naked on clouds or half transformed into swans, she wore a head covering and kept her eyes downcast. It wasn't prudery, it was dignity. She dressed like someone whose presence didn't need to shout. Because, let's face it, what would a statue of her even look like, not mid-battle, not swooning? Here's a fringe tidbit you'll enjoy. In the few times she was depicted, Hestia was often shown fully clothed with a veil. And you can imagine her, can't you? Maybe she said, "Just paint the fire," or "I'm busy baking," or nothing at all. That's part of her magic. And yet, somehow, she was included in the most important rituals. Let that sink in. The goddess with no temple fanfare, no scandal, no cult of personality, always came first. It's wild, isn't it? Maybe that's why you never see her holding a lightning bolt or a trident. You glance again around Olympus statues, symbols, soaring architecture. The fire isn't even hers exclusively. It's shared. That's the point, and maybe that's why her statues didn't endure. You reminded of the flickering fire in every ancient home, the kind that had to be kept burning through the night. The kind that children learned to protect before they learned their alphabets. There's a reason her worship persisted even when others faded. So no, she may not have statues, but she has places. Millions of them. That's why, when you close your eyes, you don't picture her face. You picture warmth. And Hestia, wherever she is, would nod and say, "Exactly." You shift your weight just slightly, and the floor beneath you doesn't creak. Of course, it doesn't tits Olympus. After all, a divine residence built by magic, marble, and a casual disregard for engineering physics. But still, something feels solid beneath you. Grounded. That's not architecture. That's Hestia. You're not in a temple, not in a gold-covered sanctuary with 12 towering columns. Walk into an ancient shrine to Zeus, and there's a thunder-wielding colossus staring you down. Step into Aphrodite's, and you're greeted by so many sensual poses, you start blushing on behalf of the sculptor. But with Hestia, no imagery, no dramatic entrance, just a fire. In the center, always in the center. That sacredness can be baked into the ordinary. That sitting down to warm your hands could count as a ritual. You're somewhere humbler. A threshold, a small stone alcove. No ceiling murals. No dramatic sculptures of half-clothed gods doing exaggerated gestures. Just a low hearth, a place to sit, and an ever-burning flame. And still stop at Hestia's hearth in the town hall. It was public, simple, always burning. And here's the funny thing. This is her temple. The Vestal Virgins, a group of priestesses who tended the eternal fire, were treated with nearly unparalleled respect. Smiling at the girls who carried her torch literally. Laughing softly when someone fumbled a prayer but still lit the oil lamp just right. No massive doors, no looming altar, just a circle. Fire in the center, clean swept stones. Maybe a clay bowl of barley, maybe not. They were powerful, protected, and occasionally terrifying. Used, lived in. Nothing showy, it's just warmth and breath and the daily hum of existence. Their job? Keep the flame alive. Because if it went out, the entire city would panic. Because Hestia, unlike every other Olympian, preferred sanctuaries that didn't even have statues. A bit of oil, pinch of salt, maybe a honey cake. No blood, no big sacrifices. You didn't have to slaughter anything. You didn't have to impress her. She just wanted your sincerity, your flame. Seriously. But there's agreement on one point. Hestia didn't need an image. Her symbol was the fire. The nod of someone who's been here the whole time. Watching, not judging. Just keeping the flame steady while the rest of the world spins faster than it needs to. Still sat close. Still passed warm food hand to hand. The number of temples or the shine of the marble. But here's a goddess whose temples looked like kitchens, whose altars were stone circles blackened by smoke, and whose presence was felt not in thunder but in continuity. And you didn't visit her temple, you lived in it. In the moment when someone says, "Here, I saved you a seat," she was mythed, woven into daily life so completely that people didn't see the seams anymore. Every house with a hearth was a sanctuary. Every fire pit was a shrine. The walls are clay, the floor is swept dirt, and in the middle the middle is a fire circle. Around it, the family eats, argues, prays, sleeps, and at its heart, Hestia. No booming voices or incense clouds or declarations from the mountaintop. Just a candle, a meal, a moment of stillness. The sacredness of routine. That's Hestia. Historians still discuss whether this was out of reverence or intentional minimalism. You let that sink in. The goddess whose domain was so universal that everyone worshipped her often without realizing it. There's something radical about that. The idea that worship doesn't require grandeur. You walk through the memory of an ancient Greek home now. Not in person, obviously. She had other flames to tend. But her presence flickered there too. Even the Praetonion, the ceremonial town hall of many Greek cities, wasn't just a political center. It was where the sacred flame burned. And guess who kept it going? Hestia. In the city of Delphi, the most sacred spot in Greece, visitors could walk past Apollo's magnificent temple. And in Rome, her equivalent Vesta got an upgrade. You're tempted to imagine her watching it all from afar. She didn't care about perfect words. She cared about presence. You walk through one of her ancient shrines, now not a reconstruction, not a ruin, but a memory. There's a goat outside, chewing lazily on a basket. Of course there is. Hestia's temples weren't dramatic, they were alive. Here's a curious fringe note. Hestia's offerings were usually mild. And honestly, that's kind of refreshing. Imagine if modern spirituality looked more like this. You wonder if this is why she avoided myth? And yet, there was power in that. Because when cities fell, when temples were ransacked, when names were erased, and statues toppled, people still lit fires. Her worship outlasted empires because it never relied on stone. It relied on rhythm. You kneel by the fire again, and Hestia doesn't greet you. She just nods. And you think about how you've been taught to measure importance, volume, applause, influence. You start to see her everywhere now. In the tea kettle, in the flicker of a street lamp, in the hush before dinner is served. That's her statue. That's her temple. And she smiles not because you said the right thing, but because you finally noticed. You're not walking anymore, you're drifting, like smoke rising lazily from the coals. And now the scene around you begins to shift. Not dramatically, Hestia wouldn't approve of that, but softly, gradually, until you're no longer on Olympus or in a humble Greek home, but standing in the heart of a bustling ancient city. It's just a carefully maintained hearth in the center of the city. The public hearth, the sacred fire, the flame of Hestia. Athens, maybe, or Delphi, or Thebes. The details don't matter. What matters is the feeling. And when you step closer, no one shouts or gestures or demands that you kneel. The priest nearby doesn't even look up from his sweeping. It's not a place of spectacle. It's a place of center. People move around you carrying amphorae, leading goats, buying figs, arguing in loud bursts of poetic insults. The streets are uneven. The sun is sharp. But in the middle of it all, always, there's a flame. The answer, oddly, may be her passivity itself. She didn't command. She endured. She didn't conquer. She held. Do you remember how colonies were founded in the ancient world? The settlers didn't just pack food and gods and weapons. They packed Hestia. Imagine a group of tired sailors landing on a rocky coast, exhausted and unsure, and their first act is to gather around a spark, to light something from the old place, to say, "We begin again but with her." They took fire from their city's public hearth and carried it with them, literally, in a vessel, across the sea. When everything else collapsed or shifted or caught fire, she was the thing that stayed. They created the cult of Vesta, their version of Hestia, and appointed the famous Vestal Virgins to guard her fire. These women had serious power, not just religious, but legal. They could pardon criminals. They were protected by law. And all they did was guard a flame. They don't need to. They orient themselves by it. like a compass finding true north. They know it's there. Before you begged for victory, you thanked her. After you asked for healing or vengeance or divine gossip, you returned to her. But the hearth doesn't move. It anchors everything without demanding attention. Because no matter what else happened, you always came home. To the center. To the fire. No speeches. Just a long match and a lot of trust. Not a bonfire, not a signal flare. A practiced motion. Centuries of practice. A pulse in the heart of the city. No councils opened, no festivals begun, no alliances formed unless her flame was burning. Hestia wasn't at the edges of governance. She was the glue of it. You feel it before you see it, a kind of stillness in the air, like sound tucks itself away. Because that's what Hestia became, not just the hearth of homes, but the hearth of the state. Here's your historical fact. In most major Greek city-states, the Prychneon, or town hall, contained a fire that symbolized the unity of the polis. It wasn't metaphorically, was literal. Kept burning day and night, and if that fire ever died, it meant something had gone very wrong. With someone saying, "We're still here." That's Hestia. No decisions were made without her. You walk around the square, watching merchants, officials, philosophers, and farmers pass by. Not one of them bows to the fire. And there's something fascinating about that. A goddess with no mythic battles, no epic romances, and no tragic fall becomes the symbol of national stability. Historians still discuss how this even happened. How did a figure so narratively passive become politically essential? That's power. And as you linger here, watching the scene unfold like a quiet dream, that fire was lit first in the new colony, before crops, before walls, before law. The flame of home came first. You pause and let that settle. And she didn't ask for it. Never issued commands. Never demanded loyalty. She simply was loyalty. The embodied idea of continuity. A quirky side note. The Romans took this even further. Can you imagine that today? A team of government officials responsible solely for keeping the national candle lit. It sounds strange, till you realize that everything meaningful in society starts not with shouting, but with presence. She's not ceremonial, she's foundational. And in a time where everything was unstable, gods fighting, wars flaring, cities rising and falling, she became the symbol of the one thing people needed most: a reason to stay. It's no wonder she was honored first and last in every prayer. You glance around again. The city is busy, but the flame is still. A child runs past laughing. A donkey snorts. A vendor yells about cheese. You look down, and for just a moment, you swear you see her hand reach into the flame, not to control it, but to tend it. And now you know. She wasn't boring, she was indispensable. No empire was built without her, no treaty signed, no home complete. No day ended without her glow. You sit again, closer now, letting the warmth touch your face. Around you, the city hums and turns and argues and lives. And she just tends. The city fades now, gently dissolving like the final embers of an evening fire. You don't stand, you don't need to. Everything shifts on its own, and you're carried softly from the civic center of ancient Greece to a dim, cool chamber on Olympus. It's quiet here. Olympus has a kitchen. Of course it does. Someone has to keep the divine pantry in order, and you can bet it isn't Ares. Hestia rules. Not with decrees, not with divine threats, but with order, with flavor, with warmth. He once tried to eat an entire wheel of goat cheese raw, wax and all. Hestia was the only one who noticed before it became a mythological gastrointestinal emergency. One theory suggests it represents her role as first taster in every sacrifice, meaning she had to stay clear-headed, focused. Others think it was a signal to mortals. You, Dante, need extravagance to be divine. A warmth behind her eyes that doesn't need punchlines or puns. She laughs, occasionally. Quietly, the kind of laugh that makes you feel like you earned it. She just slid a bowl of stew across the table to a mortal who wandered in by accident. Smells faintly of steam and roasted grain. But the others stay quiet, not out of fear. This is the real throne. The stone table, the bubbling pot, the fire, the refusal to shout. One where all the gods were arguing. Shocking, right? About the nature of truth. Apollo strummed his lyre and proclaimed truth was beauty. Athena said it was knowledge. Hermes offered 3 contradictory answers and a wink. And Hestia? Artemis fuming about a poorly planned moon festival. Ares sparring with shadows. Zeus trying to convince someone that this time he's serious about fidelity. But here, Hestia is folding napkins. Not because the flavor changed, but because you've stopped needing it to impress you. And suddenly you realize you could stay here forever and never get bored. Because it's not about the napkins. Just wood, polished by centuries of elbows and a single unlit candle at its center. Because the real fire is behind you in the hearth. That's the trick of her space it is happening. It's just not dramatic. Always the hearth. That sharing food around fire was not just nutrition, but ritual. That moment when no one speaks because nothing needs to be said. The meal wasn't fuel. It was belonging. But respect. Somehow, this still is it. Dionysus pokes his head in once. That's barley water realness. Sniffs the barley brew. Hestia brews a barley, tisane mild, earthy, slightly nutty. The kind of thing that warms you without numbing anything. The kind of drink that says, stay a while, you're safe, and leaves without a word. Even Hermes, the trickster, leaves her spoon untouched. That's saying something. There are no feasts, no lightning, no poetry recitals. Just the faint sound of a wooden ladle tapping the inside of a pot. You start to notice something strange. While the rest of Olympus spends its days planning feasts, festivals, and divine fashion statements, Hestia is sober. You're in Hestia's kitchen. Yes. Doesn't sip nectar like it's going out of style. No mead, no wine. Not even the honey-infused stuff Dionysus peddles when he's in his craft beverage phase. She's not alone here, because here you sit at her long stone table. It's not ornate. No gold inlay, no opal centerpiece. You're served something you don't recognize, steamed and rustic and surprisingly comforting. It tastes like home. Even if your home never tasted like this, and as you eat, that's not metaphor. She doesn't drink ambrosia the way the others do. Instead, historians still debate the significance of this. Was it a ritual choice, a symbol of temperance, a lifestyle brand ahead of its time? Whatever the reason, the effect is striking. While Dionysus is off making satyrs cry laugh into pomegranate sangria, Hestia is steadying the room. And she's not joyless. Don't mistake her calm for absence of delight. There's humor in her smile. You remember a lesser-known myth now, not in Homer, not in Hesiod, but whispered in later stories. She didn't answer. That was her answer. Here is your quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that the act of eating together commensality was a form of sacred bonding because of Hestia. You feel it now. That old truth. That sacred hush after the first bite. And you look around this kitchen, this not quite myth, not quite mortal room manned, see what the others missed. No one is drunk here. No one is shouting. Just the warm pull of presence. You sip the barley drink again. It tastes better now. Outside this space, the other gods are still being themselves, Apollo composing odes no one asked for. It sounds absurd. It is. Folding divine napkins, but there's a rhythm to it. A kind of meditation. It's about choosing gentleness. In a world that rewards spectacle, Hestia says, what if you just made something warm and offered it without needing praise? What if sacredness was less about miracles and more about keeping things clean, warm, and quietly generous? What if divinity didn't need intoxication to feel powerful? You sip again. You're not even sure when you stopped waiting for something to happen. And for once, that feels enough. You lean back slightly in your chair, not enough to creak, just enough to exhale. There's something soothing about being in a space that doesn't demand anything from you. No revelations, no flashy epiphanies, just ... being here. And with Hestia, that's the entire point. You glance toward her. She's not watching you, but somehow she knows. The only Olympian who never demanded sacrifices out of fear or flattery. She didn't need gold-covered temples or festivals with questionable dance moves. She didn't even want your goats. She just wanted you to keep the fire going. Why, when every other god is addicted to attention, Hestia seems almost allergic to it? Why mortals loved her more for refusing the spotlight? She always knows. Not in the creepy read-a-writh thoughts way Athena uses to win arguments. Hestia just understands. You don't have to say much around her. She hears the words between your words. You think, not for the first time, how she got this way. And here's the thing. Mortals adored her. They lit a fire from Hestia's flame. Quiet, simple, profound. In a pantheon full of danger, seduction, and vengeful mood swings, Hestia was safe, consistent, trustworthy. That was enough. Modern readers, even now, often find themselves quietly drawn to her, not because of an epic saga, but because she feels real. Familiar. Like that one person in your life who never makes a big deal of anything. But somehow, everything's better when they're in the room. The way she is woven through the background of myth and history, like a golden thread, visible only when the light hits it just right. Historians still wrestle with why her cult, if you can call it, that was so enduring. Theories abound. Some think it's because she was tied to the hearth, and the hearth was the last thing to fade. The one who RSVP'd maybe to every divine banquet and only showed up with a covered dish and a quiet nod. Blink and doom sit moments, a mention at the start of a prayer, a line in a hymn, and yet she's always there, first and last. The Alpha and the Omega of every sacrifice. Always in parentheses, always underlined. Others say it's because she never messed with mortals, never manipulated or punished them. But maybe it's simpler than that. It's tasting faintly of oats and memory. Maybe people loved her because she made life feel sacred. Most versions still count her among the 12. Because you can give up power and still be powerful. You can step aside and still hold the room. Because stories are for drama. And Hestia's entire existence whispers, what if the quiet stuff is sacred too, not death, not war, not ecstatic visions, but life, bread, light, a warm corner on a cold night. And somehow, that made her the most relatable god of all. You're not watching for lightning or winged sandals or seductive glances from questionable cloud formations. No one got smote, but maybe just maybe they came home, and the fire was still lit. You think about her in contrast to her siblings. Hera, desperate for control. Poseidon, moody and mercurial. Ares, tantrums in bronze. Even Demeter, loving but vengeful when wronged. But Hestia, because here, small things matter. Rituals matter. Intention matters. She never stormed off. Never punished mortals for forgetting her name. Never asked for songs. Instead, she became part of their routines, their kitchens, their silence. Here's a lovely historical quirk. When someone moved into a new house in ancient Greece, they didn't throw a party. Because to start a new life, you started with her. You're beginning to see the pattern now, aren't you? And it's not just ancient people who felt this. You smile, thinking of her as the original introvert deity, and still people noticed. There's a detail you almost forgot. Even when she gave up her throne on Olympus, she wasn't removed from the pantheon. That's Hestia's superpower. Not to conquer, but to stabilize. Even Zeus knew not to cross her. And Zeus crossed everyone. You think about the rare myths that even mention her. You glance at the fire again. It hasn't changed, but you have. You're not looking for spectacle anymore. You're just ... breathing. And Hestia notices. She offers you another cup, not of wine, not of magic, just something warm, familiar. You take it not because you're thirsty, but because it's the right thing to do. And suddenly, it clicks. This is why she never needed stories. What if folding laundry with care is worship? What if boiling water is prayer? What if showing up for someone even in silence is a divine act? No one ever turned into a tree in Hestia's stories, and that was miracle enough. You're so deep into the rhythm of this place now, you barely notice when Olympus falls away again quietly, like steam rising off warm bread. And suddenly, you're no longer in myth. You're somewhere else entirely, somewhere familiar. And no one does it with more subtlety than Hestia. She didn't get forgotten, she just melted into everything. A modern apartment, perhaps. Or a quiet countryside kitchen. A room you've sat in before but can't quite place. There's a candle lit in the corner. A stovetop hums. And without needing to be told, you know Hestia's here too. That this ancient goddess with no crown, no grand mythology, no dramatic downfall could still be moving through your life. Into the sacred silence that happens when you don't need to say anything at all. Not in the thundering way, not in visions or dreams, but in gentle gestures, repeated habits, small warmths. Zeus became a cautionary tale. Athena turned into metaphor. Poseidon got demoted to sea-themed jewelry brands. But Hestia, she moved in. Every choice to nurture instead of react. 'Cause here's the thing. Gods don't die. They shift. They blur. They adapt. You can't weigh her importance by text or temple. You think of the chair you always go to when you need a breather. She just offers the warmth and lets you decide if you want to stay. The mug that fits your hand just right. The room you tidy not because it's dirty. The quiet soul who doesn't say much but makes everyone feel calmer when they walk in the room. Hestia, Hestia, Hestia. But because it feels better when it's tended. That's her language. Not to summon anything, just to sit beside it. They talk about creating sacred space, lighting intentional fires, the spiritual power of homemaking. They're not wrong. They're just rediscovering what she never stopped doing. Like a hand on your shoulder that doesn't need to say, "I'm proud of you," because it's already understood. You measure her by what stays standing, and she's in all of it. Not the smoky ones of ancient Greece, but bedside candles, prayer corners, morning routines. Every time someone wakes up early to make breakfast for a tired child. Every time someone sets an extra plate, just in case. Every time someone sits with grief and says, "You don't have to talk. I'm here." It's a strange thought, isn't it? You sip your tea. She's there. You lock the door before bed. Light low. She's there. You keep the porch light on for someone you love. She's there, and it makes sense, in a way. Because Hestia is the only Olympian who didn't leave when the world changed. Right into our kitchens, into the warmth of hospitality, into the language of make yourself at home. Even the psychologists have caught on. Jungians call her the inner hearth, the center of the psyche, a space of constancy and self-possession. Freud didn't really touch her, but honestly, would you want him to? Hestia doesn't need interpretation. She just needs presence. And she's found her way into new altars too. That's Hestia. She may not get the worship songs, may not trend on mythological TikTok, but she's in every pause that becomes peace. Every task that becomes grounding. Historians still debate whether she counts as a major deity in modern interpretations. But they're missing the point. You glance around your own life now, and suddenly you wonder how many moments you've already spent with her without knowing it. Because she doesn't announce herself. Never did. Here's a quirky observation: modern spiritualists and self-care writers often reinvent Hestia without realizing it. You think of the minimalist who sees home as sanctuary. The baker who kneads with intention. You light a candle. And in that moment, you feel her not with a bang, but with a breath. Even in the places we forget to look, she lingers. That old saying, home is where the heart is. It could just as easily be home is where Hestia is. Because her flame never needed a temple. It needed a presence. It needed you. You're not sure when the room changed again, or if it did at all. Maybe the walls just fell away slowly, like curtains lifting. You're sitting in the same spot, and yet everything is different now. It's quiet, not the ancient quiet of Mount Olympus, not the busy hush of a city hearth, but the modern kind of quiet. A living room, late at night. A bedroom with the lights low. A phone screen dimmed and placed face down. The soft click of the thermostat. The sigh of fabric as you shift in your chair. And still, Hestia is here. But if she's here, why don't we talk about her more? Barely a role in the modern retellings where other gods strut, clash, fall in love, and start wars. Why isn't she front and center when we remember the old myths? Why does she get barely a line in books, barely a reference in popular culture? Was it the result of a male-dominated mythos that could unmake room for a woman who was seductive, vengeful, or tragic? She stepped back, gave up her seat to Dionysus, declined to join the shouting matches, refused to play a role she didn't write herself. Was it just the natural fate of any deity who refuses to demand attention? Because Hestia, the most quietly essential of all the gods, has somehow become the most forgotten. Not the flashy, fighty, fall-from-heaven stuff, but the daily stuff. And that's worth sitting with. Historians and storytellers still debate her erasure. Was it intentional? Some scholars suggest that when drama is the main currency of storytelling, peace becomes invisible. But Hestia never vanished. She was never erased. She just faded into the background. On purpose. When the pantheon was sorted and reshuffled, when thrones were reassigned and myths grew louder, you sense her in the pause before speaking. In the long exhale after a hard day, the gods were folded into legends, then reduced to metaphor. But Vesta's Colther Roman Hestio was the very last to be disbanded, in the tea left warm for someone who's running late. She doesn't need credit. That's the whole point. In the way we say welcome home like it means something deeper. And in doing so, she wrote herself into everything else instead. In Buddhism, she's the still breath of mindful presence. In Judaism, she's the Shabbat flame lit in silence. In every tradition, there's a quiet center, a light in the dark. You feel her more than you see her. She was never in it for the monument. She was in it for the maintenance. And here is what makes it all the more extraordinary. The world still runs on her values. The dinner tables. The nightlights, heretical. Maybe, but strangely beautiful. That her myths weren't more marketable. That she never got her own epic. But then, again maybe she did. The floors swept in silence. The breath you take when you hold space for someone else. Those are the altars of Hestia. Here's your historical fact. When the Roman Empire Christianized, many temples were shut down. The eternal fire was extinguished, not because belief had faded, but because law forced it. And even then, the fire didn't really go out. It lived on in candles at weddings, in hearths kept burning during childbirth. You know what's wild? Every modern religion has its own version of Hestia. She just wears different robes, not to move it, just to feel that it's still warm. In Catholicism, she's the glow of a votive candle. She never needed Olympus. She outlived it, and the world didn't even notice. You wonder now, was that her plan all along? To walk so gently across time that no one heard her footsteps, only felt the warmth she left behind. Here's your quirky tidbit. In one obscure medieval manuscript, a Christian monk speculated that Hestia had been the gentle flame of God among the pagans. Because what if she was the bridge? What if, while everyone else made gods in their own image, jealous, wrathful, loud Hestia represented what they hoped divinity could be: kind, present, quietly enduring. You can't help but feel a little sad that she's not on more posters, because this moment, this stillness, this tiny pocket of warmth, this is her myth, and you're living it. You're part of it, not as a hero or a victim or a chosen one, but as someone who knows the sacred when you feel it. You touch the candle nearby. It is, she's still here. You're somewhere between waking and dreaming now. You can't tell if it's still night or just a very gentle morning pretending not to start yet. The fire is lower, now not dying, just softer. A steady, contented flicker. Like it knows its job is almost done, and beside it, as always, is Hestia. She hasn't moved much. Just enough. Like the fire, she shifts in place, never restless, never asleep. Always here, always tending. You're not alone. You never really were. All around you, others have joined quietly. A mother nursing a child, a baker rising before dawn, a caregiver folding blankets, a solitary student studying with a candle on. They don't know each other, but they know this place. They've all answered the same silent invitation. Come rest by the flame. Just floor, fire, and feeling. But in this place, you can finally exhale. And none of them ask why she matters, because they already know. You don't. This space she holds it isn't big. It doesn't echo. There are no stained glass windows or choirs or golden thrones. And then the question arrives quietly, but clearly. Would Hestia like IKEA? And what is Hestia, if not the goddess of purposeful space? Ridiculous, right? You almost laugh? And then, because somehow, in your strange dream thought logic, the idea makes sense. Do it with your own two hands if you can. Sit in it. Let it hold you. Not small, as in less than. Small, as in focused. As in human-sized. Minimalist furniture. Simple lines, flat-packed utility. An entire philosophy of domestic space that values function, comfort, and warmth. You can picture her walking through the showroom, running her hand along a pine table, raising an eyebrow at a modular couch, pausing by the kitchen displays with a curious, approving nod. She wouldn't be dazzled by the design, but she'd love the idea. Everyday sacred. That's what she's about. And IKEA, for all its meatballs and hex keys, gets that. An entire lifestyle built around the belief that home matters. That the layout of your kitchen can change your mood. After power hollowed you out, that's when you return to the space with four walls and a soft chair and a lamp that glows instead of blinds. That good lighting might actually be a spiritual experience. That the place where you eat and sleep and share your life deserves Carhaven, if it's not expensive. Even if it's temporary. Maybe not the one you live in, but the one your soul wants. Maybe it's a cabin. Maybe it's a nook. A studio apartment with too many plants. A rented room with books stacked sideways. It doesn't matter. Hestia isn't about grandeur. She's about intention. You don't need a throne. You don't need applause. You just need presence. And she would love that philosophy. Make your space. Make it kind. Make it real. Modern culture so often worships noise, influence, disruption, and in all of that, Hestia's path remains radical. Stay in, stay grounded. Stay small. That S, the secret she S, always kept what looks boring from a distance is infinitely profound up close. It's why she never needed miracles. It's why she doesn't show up in quests or hero's journeys. Because you don't seek Hestia, you come back to her and glow. She's the final stop after all your gods have failed. After ambition exhausted you, after romance wore thin. And she's always there, waiting. No, I told you so. No judgment, just warmth. just the question. Will you stay a while? It's not dramatic, but it's final. In that simple touch, you feel the blessing of every hearth that has ever glowed, every quiet space that ever held a soul like yours, every breath that ever said, I am here. I am safe. I am home. You blink and you're in a dream version of your own home now. The light is soft. There's a cup of something warm. There's a chair for you. And somewhere, quiet as breath, is Hestia. She doesn't need to speak. You know what she's saying? This is enough. You are enough. You don't need to do anything spectacular to be sacred. You are allowed to want rest. You are allowed to stay home. You are allowed to love stillness. This, too, is divine. And then she does something rare. She reaches across and places her hand over yours. And for once, you don't have anything clever to say. No questions, no commentary. You just sit and stay. Because that's what she does. And now you do too. The world is almost entirely hushed now. No flickering scene shifts. No echoing footsteps. No divine quarrels bouncing off marble ceilings. Olympus has gone still. The city centers have faded. The hearths have all dimmed to coals. What remains is something quieter than silence. Presence without performance. You and Hestia sit together by what feels like the last fire in the universe, but not in a sad way. In a full way. In a complete way. There's nothing left to prove. And the woman who never asked for worship, yet somehow held the worship of millions for thousands of years. No more myths to review. No more facts to layer in. Just the fire. You think about how it ends for most gods. Falls from grace. Forgotten names, shrines turned to dust. But Hestia, as if she knows that her legacy ISNT in marble or mythology S in muscle memory. The way hands light candles. The way voices lower when meals are served. The way you sigh when you finally sit down and say, that's better. She doesn't end. She recedes. Gracefully. Intentionally. In every child who's tucked in. In every moment, someone chooses quiet over chaos. She is the only God you've ever met who does unmake you feel like you should be someone else in her presence. She doesn't ask for praise. But she receives it in every loaf of bread that rises. Even now, she's not looking at you. She's watching the fire. Because that's always been the secret. The flame was never about her. It was about you. It was always about you. The whole time she's been tending it, you thought she was keeping it alive for the gods. For tradition, for power. But no, just a sliver of flame. She doesn't explain. She doesn't need to. You already understand. She was keeping it alive for whoever needed it most next. And tonight, that was you. Historians still debate her disappearance from the center of Olympus. They argue about political shifts, patriarchal erasures, ritual evolution. But they never seem to consider the simplest answer. That she left because she wanted to. Because power wasn't hers to hoard. It was hers to give away. For the self inside you that aches for stillness and never knew how to ask for it. And now she gives it to you. She hands you a small taper. It's your fire now, not to control, but to tend, to carry, to keep. For your home, for your people. You hold it in both hands. It's warm, familiar, and perfectly ordinary. And that, at last, is Hestia's final miracle. She made the ordinary divine and left the divine in your hands. Now the fire is low. No longer burning brightly, but glowing soft, like the last page of a long, beautiful book. You're still sitting, still warm. In that comforting way that lets your limbs settle. Your eyes don't want to stay open anymore, and they don't have to. You've heard the whole story. Not a tale of battle or romance or tragedy. A tale of care, of presence, of calm. Still safe, rest. And that small ember she gave you, it's still there. Quiet, flickering inside you. It doesn't demand anything. It just waits. You don't need to hold on tightly. It won't go out. The room around you is slower now. The air is heavier. Let your breath slow now. Feel it match the rhythm of the fire. In, out. Warmth. Nothing else is needed. Just peace. You are here. The goddess of the hearth is still tending something inside you. Not because you're a hero, not because you're chosen, but because you sat still long enough to feel it. And now, it's yours to keep. So let it glow. Let it soften your thoughts. Let it warm your sleep. No grand finale. No final twist. Just Hestia. Just you, and the quiet you now carry with you. Sweet dreams.